The knock on the door came at 6:12 a.m., sharp and deliberate, the kind of knock that doesn't ask for permission. Ethan Caldwell froze halfway through buttoning his shirt. Outside his penthouse windows, Chicago was still gray and half asleep. Lake Michigan looked like a sheet of cold steel under the winter sky. The knock came again, harder this time. "Mr. Caldwell." "FBI." For a split second, he thought it was a mistake. "A neighbor." "Wrong floor." Then he saw the flashing blue lights reflecting off the glass of his living room windows 30 stories up. His phone buzzed violently on the marble kitchen counter. 3 words from his CFO, all accounts frozen. The air left his lungs. He walked to the door slowly, pulse thudding in his ears. When he opened it, 4 agents stood in dark jackets, faces expressionless. One held a folder. "Ethan Caldwell?" the lead agent asked. "Yes. You're being served with a federal warrant for securities fraud, insider manipulation, and embezzlement of investor funds tied to Caldwell Renewable Systems." The words didn't make sense. They floated in the air like smoke. "That's impossible," Ethan said calmly, even though his stomach twisted. "I didn't authorize anything like that." The agent handed him the paperwork. "Your signature says otherwise." Ethan stared at the document. It was his signature. Perfect. Exact. Impossible. Behind the agents, cameras gathered in the hallway. Someone had tipped off the press. Within 20 minutes, his face was live on morning news across Chicago. "Golden boy of clean energy under federal investigation." Ethan had built Caldwell Renewable from scratch. Solar microgrid systems for urban buildings. Sustainable infrastructure contracts with city agencies. Investors trusted him because he was transparent, methodical, precise. He triple-checked every number. He would never risk prison for greed. He was too smart for that. And too careful. As agents searched his apartment, Ethan's mind raced through possibilities. His CFO, Melissa Grant, had access to financials, but she'd been with him for 8 years. Loyal. Precise. Almost painfully ethical. His chief operations officer, Daniel Reeves, handled vendor negotiations and expansion. Aggressive, yes, but not suicidal. Or was he? One agent approached him. "We'll need your devices." Ethan handed over his phone, laptop, tablet without protest. His expression remained controlled. That was his strength. Even when terrified, he looked composed. But inside, something cold was forming. This wasn't random. This was constructed. Someone had built this. By noon, trading of Caldwell Renewable stock was halted. Investors pulled emergency board meetings. Major clients suspended contracts. His email access was revoked. At 2:47 p.m., he received the real blow. The board voted him out as CEO. Effective immediately. The vote was unanimous. Unanimous. Even Melissa. Even Daniel. Ethan sat alone in a private conference room at the firm's downtown headquarters. The same room where he had signed their first major contract 5 years ago. The skyline behind him now felt distant, hostile. Daniel walked in first. Navy suit. Perfect tie. Controlled expression. "I didn't authorize this vote," Ethan said quietly. Daniel sighed like a disappointed older brother. "The evidence is overwhelming. You know it's fabricated." Daniel didn't sit. The board believes otherwise. Ethan watched his face carefully. Micro-expressions. A twitch. A flicker. Nothing obvious. Melissa entered next, avoiding eye contact. Melissa, Ethan said softly. You reviewed every financial movement. You sign off on transfers. You know this isn't me. Her jaw tightened. The transfers went through your executive override code. My override code requires biometric confirmation. She hesitated. Just slightly. Ethan saw it. There's no way that code was used without me physically authorizing it, he said. Daniel finally sat across from him. Biometric systems can be bypassed. By who? Silence. And there it was. Not denial. Not defense. Silence. Ethan leaned back slowly. You think I don't know? Daniel's eyes hardened. Know what? That this is coordinated. Melissa looked up sharply. Ethan continued, voice steady. Someone cloned my credentials. Accessed my retinal scan data. Manipulated vendor contracts. Redirected funds offshore. Layered it to look organic. Daniel gave a thin smile. That's a serious accusation. It's an observation. Outside the glass walls, employees moved quickly, whispering. News trucks lined the street below. Daniel leaned forward slightly. You built something incredible, Ethan. But you were always cautious. Too cautious. The board wanted faster growth. Aggressive expansion. So you frame me? You're emotional right now, Daniel replied calmly. Melissa finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. The federal audit found shell companies. Ethan looked at her directly. Who registered them? They trace back to your IP. My home IP? She nodded. Ethan felt it click. 2 months ago, Daniel had insisted on upgrading the penthouse security system. Claimed the company's public visibility required higher protection. Smart home integration. Remote diagnostics. Daniel's brother owned the security tech firm. Ethan remembered signing the service agreement without reading the vendor ownership disclosure. A mistake. A small, human mistake. You installed a backdoor, Ethan said quietly. Daniel's expression didn't change. Be careful. You harvested biometric data from my home system. Melissa's breathing quickened. Daniel stood. This meeting is over. Security will escort you out. Ethan rose slowly. You won't get away with it. Daniel paused at the door. It's not about getting away with anything. It's about survival. The door closed. Ethan walked out of the building not as founder, but as suspect. Snow began falling lightly as he stepped onto LaSalle Street. Reporters shouted questions. Microphones thrust forward. Did you steal investor money? Are you going to prison? Did you falsify environmental impact reports? He didn't answer. His attorney, Claire Whitman, met him at a quiet hotel bar later that evening. She was sharp, unshakable, known for dismantling federal cases. You're either lying to me, she said calmly, or you've been surgically destroyed. I didn't do it. She studied him. I believe you. Good. But belief doesn't win cases. Evidence does. Ethan explained the security upgrade. The biometric system. The IP routing. Claire listened without interrupting. If they spoofed your retinal scan, she said slowly, that requires physical access to your image database. My home cloud server. Which was installed by Reeves Secure Systems. She typed something into her laptop. Then she stopped. That company transferred majority ownership 3 weeks ago. To who? She turned the screen toward him. Daniel Reeves. Directly. Ethan felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Chicago winter. That's conflict of interest, Ethan said. It's worse, Claire replied. It's motive. But motive for what? Claire looked at him carefully. Your company's about to receive a federal infrastructure contract worth $2.4 billion. Whoever controls Caldwell Renewable controls that contract. The board. Daniel. Melissa. Or all three. They needed me gone before the award announcement, Ethan murmured. Claire nodded slowly. And with criminal charges attached, you're radioactive. Investors won't support you. Even if you're cleared later. Ethan's mind shifted from shock to calculation. Daniel had always pushed for faster expansion. Riskier acquisitions. Leveraged debt strategies Ethan rejected. Daniel wasn't reckless. He was impatient. And now he had what he wanted. But Ethan wasn't finished. I want forensic access to the biometric system, Ethan said. Claire shook her head. The company controls it now. Not entirely. She raised an eyebrow. Ethan leaned closer. The home system was synced to a secondary backup server. Offline. Manual activation only. Where? He looked at her evenly. Not in Chicago. Claire's eyes sharpened. You planned for this? I planned for everything. A flicker of something almost like pride crossed her face. Where is it? She asked. Ethan took a slow breath. In Boston. Claire closed her laptop carefully. Then we're going to Boston. Outside, the snow thickened, swallowing the city in white silence. Across town, in a high-rise office overlooking the frozen river, Daniel Reeves stood alone by his window. He held a glass of bourbon loosely in his hand. His phone buzzed. Melissa. Is it done? She asked quietly. Daniel watched the snow fall. Not yet. You said once the accounts froze. It's under control. There was tension in her voice. He suspects. Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. Of course he does. That's why this had to be thorough. And if he finds something? Daniel's voice dropped to a near whisper. He won't. He ended the call. But his jaw tightened. Because deep down, Daniel knew one thing. Ethan Caldwell was not a man who panicked. He was a man who prepared. And if Ethan had prepared for this, then this wasn't over. The next morning, Boston was wet and cold, rain slicing sideways through narrow streets lined with brick townhouses. Ethan stood under a black umbrella outside a quiet brownstone in Beacon Hill, his expression calm, almost detached. Claire studied him. You look like you're about to attend a board meeting. I am, Ethan said. Just a different kind. Inside the brownstone was not a home. It was a data vault. 3 years ago, after a cyber attack attempt on Caldwell Renewable's early prototype software, Ethan had invested privately in a redundant archival system, an offline forensic backup designed for catastrophic breach scenarios. It wasn't company property. It wasn't disclosed to the board. It was registered under a Shell LLC tied to a trust his late father had established. Daniel never knew. They entered through a reinforced steel door hidden behind what looked like a bookshelf. Inside, low hums filled the concrete room. Servers sat in temperature-controlled racks, blinking quietly in the dim light. Claire removed her coat. "Tell me this isn't illegal." "It's legal," Ethan said. "It just isn't advertised." He activated the system manually using a hardware key from his coat pocket. Screens flickered to life. "This vault stores mirror captures of my biometric authentication logs," he explained. "Every time my retinal scan was used, the system recorded not just the image, but timestamp data, network handshake IDs, and device origin mapping." Claire crossed her arms. "And if your scan was spoofed? Then the originating device won't match my physical location." He pulled up the date of the largest alleged embezzlement transfer. There it was. Retinal authentication confirmed. Executive override activated. Transfer approved. Claire exhaled slowly. "That's what they're using." Ethan zoomed into the metadata. Silence filled the room. Then Claire leaned forward. "That's not your device." The authentication originated from his home network IP, but the hardware ID didn't match any device registered in his penthouse. Instead, it matched a maintenance node embedded inside the security system itself. "Reeves Secure Systems," Claire whispered. Ethan's jaw tightened. He piggybacked authentication through the security firmware. She looked at him sharply. "That means the retinal data was harvested." "Yes." "And replicated." "Yes." But how did he bypass the live retinal response protocol? "It requires micromovement." Ethan stared at the screen. Then he felt it. Cold realization. The system upgrade included infrared calibration mapping. Claire's eyes widened. "They scanned your retinal depth when they optimized your lighting." Ethan nodded slowly. "He didn't spoof my eye. He cloned it." Claire stepped back, almost in disbelief. "That's surgical." "He's been planning this for over a year." Outside, thunder rolled faintly. Claire regained focus quickly. "We can use this." "Not yet," Ethan said. She frowned. "This proves tampering." "It proves technical manipulation." "But Daniel will argue I authorized the security integration." "He owns the security company now." "Exactly." "Now." Ethan pulled up corporate registry documents. 3 weeks before the federal raid, Daniel quietly acquired majority control of Reeves Secure Systems through layered acquisitions routed via Delaware holding companies. He consolidated ownership before triggering the fraud, Ethan said. "That establishes intent." Claire nodded slowly. "But intent isn't enough. We need proof he personally executed the override." Ethan stared at the screen. Then he noticed something subtle. A secondary access ping. The night before the federal warrant was issued. A remote login into the security system backend. Originating from downtown Chicago. Specifically, Caldwell Renewable Headquarters. Claire leaned over his shoulder. "That's after you were locked out." "Yes." "And before the FBI raid?" Ethan's voice turned colder. "They planted final confirmation logs to align with the audit timeline." Claire's expression sharpened. "We subpoena internal access badges for that night." Ethan nodded. "And server room entry records." 3 days later, the subpoena responses arrived. Only 2 executives accessed headquarters after 10 p.m. that night. Daniel Reeves. Melissa Grant. Claire placed the printed documents on the hotel table in silence. Ethan studied them carefully. "Melissa," he said quietly. Claire looked at him. "You still seem surprised." "She wasn't ambitious," Ethan murmured. "She was cautious." Cautious people can be coerced. Or cornered. Or promised something. Ethan leaned back slowly. Daniel couldn't execute this alone. He needed financial system authorization layering. Melissa controls treasury approvals. Claire nodded. Which means either she's complicit, or she's trapped. Ethan stood and walked toward the window. Boston's skyline blurred in the rain. He thought back to small things. Melissa insisting on revising certain vendor structures. Melissa encouraging him to delegate more system oversight to Daniel during expansion. Melissa pushing the board to adopt the new security integration quickly. Not aggressive. Not obvious. But consistent. A slow alignment. "She's not trapped," Ethan said quietly. "She chose this." Claire crossed her arms. "What's your move?" Ethan turned around. "Divide them." That evening, Claire leaked a controlled forensic summary to a trusted investigative journalist, not accusing Daniel directly, but raising technical inconsistencies in the biometric audit trail. Within 24 hours, headlines shifted. Questions surface in Caldwell fraud case. Biometric data integrity under scrutiny. Federal authorities announced a secondary review. Daniel called Melissa immediately. "What did you tell anyone?" he demanded. "Nothing," she snapped. "I followed your instructions." "Then how are they questioning the retinal logs?" Silence. Daniel's breathing grew tighter. "You accessed the server room that night. Did anyone see you?" "No." "Are you sure?" I said no. But doubt crept into her voice. Daniel ended the call without another word. He stood alone in his office, staring at the city below. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. Meanwhile, Ethan made his final move. He requested a private meeting with the board. Not as CEO. As a shareholder. Legally, he still owned 18%. Enough to demand an executive session. They agreed reluctantly. The boardroom felt colder than usual. 12 members sat around the polished table. Daniel at one end. Melissa beside him. Ethan entered calmly. No anger. No theatrics. Just control. "You shouldn't be here," Daniel said evenly. "I'm still an owner," Ethan replied. Claire distributed forensic reports quietly. The biometric authentication used in the alleged embezzlement, Ethan began, originated from firmware embedded in Reeves Secure Systems hardware. Murmurs around the table. Daniel remained still. "That's speculation. It's metadata." Ethan clicked a remote. The screen displayed server logs. Additionally, he continued, remote backend access was initiated from this building the night before federal action. Eyes shifted toward Daniel. And Treasury override confirmations were layered through CFO credentials without secondary compliance review. Melissa's hands tightened in her lap. Ethan looked directly at her. "You bypassed internal dual control safeguards." She swallowed. Daniel's voice sharpened. "You authorized those safeguards to be flexible during expansion." "I authorized flexibility," Ethan replied calmly. not unilateral control. Silence pressed in. Then Ethan delivered the final piece. I have submitted these findings directly to federal investigators, including proof that Reeves Secure Systems transferred ownership to Daniel Reeves weeks before the fraud was executed. The room went very still. Board members looked at Daniel slowly. You never disclosed that acquisition, one director said quietly. Daniel stood. This is a deflection. He's desperate. Ethan's voice didn't rise. I didn't steal from this company. But someone did. Melissa suddenly spoke, her voice shaking. He said it was temporary. Every head turned toward her. Daniel's face hardened. He said the offshore routing would inflate short-term earnings projections. That the federal contract required stronger valuation metrics. That once it cleared, we would reverse the structure. Daniel stared at her in disbelief. Be careful. You told me it was survival, she said, tears forming. You said Ethan would never move fast enough. That the board would replace him anyway. Murmurs grew louder. Melissa's voice cracked. You said no one would get hurt. Daniel's composure finally fractured. You think you're innocent, he snapped at her. You signed the approvals. You designed it, she shot back. The board chair stood abruptly. Enough. Security was called. Daniel tried one last time to regain control. This company will collapse without decisive leadership. Ethan met his eyes calmly. Leadership without integrity collapses on its own. Federal agents entered the room minutes later. This time, they weren't there for Ethan. As Daniel was escorted out, he paused near Ethan. You were always too careful, Daniel muttered. And you, Ethan replied quietly, were never careful enough. Melissa resigned that afternoon and later negotiated cooperation terms with investigators. Weeks passed. Charges against Ethan were formally dropped. Public statements corrected the narrative. Stock slowly stabilized. But reputations are fragile things. Ethan didn't immediately return as CEO. Instead, he restructured governance. Independent cybersecurity oversight. Immutable audit protocols. No single executive override. Trust rebuilt through transparency, not charisma. 6 months later, Caldwell Renewable secured the federal infrastructure contract. This time, awarded under intense scrutiny. One evening, Ethan stood alone again by his penthouse window in Chicago. The lake was calm. The city alive below. Claire called him. You could have crushed them harder, she said. I didn't need to, he replied. Most people would have. I'm not most people. He ended the call and looked out at the skyline. He had been betrayed strategically. Publicly humiliated. Almost destroyed. But survival, he realized, wasn't about aggression. It was about preparation. And patience. The knock that once brought chaos had forced something else into clarity. Trust was earned. Power was tested. And the most dangerous opponent wasn't the loudest. It was the one who waited.